So in this video, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. A colleague of mine named Paul Hicks from Switchgear.ca has generously taken some time to sit down with me to go over some ideas about sales and leadership, entrepreneurship, the challenges with growing a business, and much more. We had a nice talk. We got to a lot of different things, and I want to share that video with you now. So I'm joined today by Paul Hicks from Switchgear. He's a senior consultant there, and he draws his expertise from over 20 years as a sales and contact center professional. In his last position as VP of Sales, he led a national team of sales professionals responsible for $300 million in revenue. And in that role, he experienced the changes in culture and the improvement of results that Switchgear delivered. And many years later, this experience motivated him to join the Switchgear family, enabling him to leverage his leadership and industry expertise to help others. Paul's a skilled communicator with a reputation of delivering results. And as he always says, a problem clearly stated is half solved. By helping clients isolate and clarify business constraints, it enables them to design customized strategies that lead to sustainable results. Paul has experience in many industries with a specialty in communication and technology. And when he's not helping clients, he's hanging out with his wife and 3 kids. I know he loves cooking, sports, specifically golf and travel. And Paul, thank you so much for joining me today.
Adrian, awesome to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. So let's get right to it. So, we're in the tail end of 2024 as we record this. You have a ton of experience in sales and service. So I guess, first of all, what's your specialty? How do you help teams shift their mindset to drive different outcomes in both sales and in service?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think one of the things that we focus on and that I've really embraced is this idea that we don't think our way into new ways of acting. We act our way into new ways of thinking. And so to say to somebody, here's what we're going to do, here's how we're going to change, let's talk about it, think about it, design it, make it all look sexy and effective, that's an important piece of this. But unless you actually get people to take action, people aren't going to move from where they are to where they could be. And it's often the lack of comfort. It's, people don't like being uncomfortable. People generally don't like trying new things, or the first time you try something new, it's hard. It doesn't exactly go the way the PowerPoint says it should. Mm-hmm. So a lot of what we focus on is really just helping people embrace that feeling of uncomfortable, mm-hmm. to just earn the opportunity to try something new. We're not even talking about mastery or perfection or anything like that. We're just saying, let's try it. And we have a whole system designed around how we encourage people to not just try, but to iterate and evolve so that we can install the new normal, which mm-hmm. is kind of where organizations want to go. It might also be helpful to note that I went through the Switchgear program as a sales director back in 2014. So I was a client mm-hmm. of Switchgear before I became a partner at Switchgear.
Right.
And going through that experience was life-changing for me professionally, personally. The skills, the techniques, everything that I learned was a game changer. So yeah, that's just a little bit of the background.
Mm-hmm. Do you find that there's a lot of, and it's something that I like to say, paralysis by analysis sometimes when somebody's, they're looking to implement something, a big change, and they just, you mentioned the PowerPoint doesn't go as it should, but they're looking at all the documents, they're looking at the facts and figures, they're looking sort of, a step-by-step approach, and it just gets bogged down all the time from that over-analysis.
Yeah, and I think that happens a lot in my experience, at the executive, more senior levels, right? You have people who are in boardrooms kind of trying to figure out what's the new strategy, what's the next direction, what's our next approach. Mm-hmm. And they spend a lot of time analyzing and trying to perfect, how are we going to go to market, right? It includes the marketing, the messaging, the value prop, all these things. And then they kind of throw it over the fence to the frontline teams that are supposed to execute. Mm-hmm. And they're left to figure out what it actually means to them from a day-to-day standpoint. So I think there's a lot of the analysis paralysis on one side of this.
Right.
And then when it comes to the execution, it's just okay, guys, go, specifically from a sales standpoint, right? Just go. We're gonna launch this new product. We give you a day, a couple of days, some one-pagers, a quick product overview. Now you go and sell this. Mm-hmm. And so I find that there's the two sides of that coin, where there's a lot of delay thinking analysis on one side.
Hmm.
And then the other side is just go,
Yeah.
like instantaneous, like go figure it out.
Yeah.
And then we just leave them to kind of flounder a little bit in on their own.
Yeah, it's funny. I was actually just chatting with somebody who he's leading a sales team, and he actually said, it was giving me a little bit of background on sort of the problems that he'd been having with this sales team. It was an outbound team, and he's like, it's like they don't understand a word I'm saying. It's like I'm not speaking English to them, and I think that's pretty much the same thing where they've got all the information, and then they just tell that team, okay, here you go, here's the front line, go implement this, and they're kind of stuck there with all this information, and they just go, what do I do?
Yeah, well, and I'm working with a team right now that's kind of going through that exact experience where with this particular customer, they launched a new product or like I guess a new tier of product. They have their core offering and then they built this secondary tier that they wanted the sales team positioning inside of some of their conversations. And we spent 2 weeks. We do these things called Thursday tune-up sessions.
Okay.
We bring the sales team together for an hour and we're just tackling a particular problem that's real and present right now.
Mhm.
Right. So it could be something like the seasonality of the business. There's a new objection that's coming up from customers, new competitors come into the marketplace, and we have to figure out how we're going to position ourselves around them. And for this particular customer who was launching this new product, we spent 2 weeks kind of just working with the sales team. Here's the product. Here's the problem that we think it solves. How would you describe this? How are customers describing this? And really bringing the frontline reps into these conversations early. And they're actually helping inform, well, if the product does this, it solves this problem. But if the product did that, it would solve this other problem over here. And here's the difference in how we would position it. So I think that's one of the big things that I've learned throughout my career is the earlier we bring the people who are actually talking to customers about these shifts in our business,
Hmm.
the earlier we bring them into the conversation, the more effective these conversations and the thinking becomes.
Right.
Versus what I described earlier of like throw it over the fence and
Hmm.
saying, go figure it out,
Yeah.
bringing them all together. And even one of the most senior account executives said, like, I love these conversations. Like I learned so much just from hearing so and so say how they position it versus somebody else. Like we're learning together through direct conversation, not hoping that we're figuring it out on our own,
Hmm.
through osmosis.
Yeah. Yeah. And that kind of leads me into the next question. It's something you and I had touched upon a little while ago, and that is the conflict usually between the sales team and the marketing team. And that's like a common obstacle that a lot of businesses face, whether they're small and you've got a marketing idea, and then you might have somebody working in sales, or where you have a large business where you have a full marketing department, a full sales department. Tell me a little bit more about like solving the conflicts between sales and marketing.
Yeah, so I guess the gift of I've worked in both sides. So I spent most of my career in sales, and then I spent a small sliver, like about 2 years on the marketing side. And I think that in itself was a real eye opener for me because I think that there tends to be this marketing doesn't know what they're doing. They don't know what sales does. Marketing is, well, sales isn't doing what we're asking them to do. They're not positioning
Hmm.
it the way we want them to. And there's just
Yep.
this disconnect. And I find that it's often just because there isn't enough dialogue and conversation. So obviously
Hmm.
in like really large organizations, it's challenging. It's hard to get the right people in the room in a very large organization to have these conversations and stay aligned. But in smaller organizations, the one I mentioned earlier,
Hmm.
where it's a small organization, it's 30 people. We do a daily 30-minute sales marketing stand-up meeting. And we meet for 30 minutes and we're reviewing metrics, we're reviewing new ads that are going out on Facebook. We're talking about MQLs, what's working. We're sharing information with marketing on for the last 30 days. Here's the profile of the customers who've bought versus here are the profiles of people who haven't. And
Hmm.
how can we retarget our marketing to go after this very narrowly specific or specifically defined ICP, ideal customer profile?
Hmm.
And those conversations are super collaborative and we have great conversation. And yeah, there's times when, marketing has something changes on the Facebook algorithm or the US political scene has been driving up Facebook ad cost per lead. Those things happen and they change and has an impact on our MQLs. But we're having those regular conversations and dialogue. We're not sitting in opposite ends of the office lobbing, grenades at each other, saying what a crappy job one team's doing versus the next. We're having really open and direct conversation. So I think it seems really simple, but it just doesn't happen very often. It's just those open, regular conversations between the two teams to ensure alignment and that everybody's on the same page.
So I guess that's sort of like how you guide teams like into adjusting to like market changes, like you were just talking about with the the U.S. the election cycle that's going through now, and adjusting for Facebook algorithm increases and evolving customer needs. Is that sort of how you operate?
Yeah, I think having those conversations are critical because we're uncovering insights on the sales side because we're the ones who frankly are talking to customers the most. Nobody talks to more customers than the sales and the service teams.
Right.
They talk to the most. And so they're going to hear things. They're if you have really good sales people in your team, they're going to be paying very close attention to the things that are coming up in conversation back in April versus today. And they're going to be able to see the shifts in customer conversations and pain points and needs. And I think the sooner we can get that information over to marketing, the sooner marketing can learn and adjust based on what we're hearing in the marketplace. If we're waiting for marketing to tell us what's shifting in the marketplace, it's often too late. Like we're behind the curve, not ahead of the curve. So I think that's one of the biggest things that I try to promote to any client or team that I'm working with is that sales. I almost think about it as they're like the early detection system or the early warning system. Customer service teams are awesome for this. Sales teams are awesome for this. When they uncover something that's new or a new objection, new pain point, the earlier we can get that over to the organization as a whole and make everybody aware of it, the better the outcomes are.
Yeah, and I've seen that myself. So one our sister company is a nutritional supplement company, and they have an outbound sales team, and the outbound sales team will ask the customers when they're doing the sales for the 30 different products that they have. What they'll do is they'll ask, what else are you dealing with right now? What kind of other health problems do you have? It's direct to consumer, so they're calling people in the US and Canada. And once they get some feedback, it usually results in an end of year meeting with that team and the marketing team to say, okay, what's our new products going to be? We're going to launch 2 new products in 2025. What are they going to be? And it's based on the feedback from the sales department. So yeah, you're right. It's like they're the early detection system. They're the canaries in the coal mine, but in a positive term.
Yeah, and I love that thinking about product development being based on solving real customer problems, right? Not features and benefits, but what are the actual problems and challenges that we're coming and facing or that we're going to help resolve for our clients. Love it.
Yeah. So give me an example, Paul, where your approach, where your kind of the way you handle things and your expertise has led to significant sales improvements within, a specific company, or you have a specific case study that you can bring up.
Yeah, sure. So one that comes to mind is there's an organization we're working with. This was a large organization. This is like one of the big 3 telecoms in Canada. And we were working with the sales team. It was about 40 people on their sales team, a number of managers, director, and we had a relationship with the GM. And the problem that the GM was facing is they were trying to do these really strategic contracts with some of their partners. And they'd spent about 3 years trying to get these agreements in place. And the challenge was after 3 years, they had 19 of these large strategic agreements in place, which you think like 19 is not bad. And it's not. It's a good starting point. But the challenge that he found was he was having to be the chief negotiator for all these contracts. So you can imagine you got 40 people who are trying to start these conversations. Some of them were good at opening, some were good at getting him to a certain point down the field, but in the end, he had to get involved in every single conversation to get it over the finish line.
He's handling the funnel as it comes in. It's basically
100%.
Yeah.
And so he's a big bottleneck and a choke point in the business. And so he came to us and he said, I want to create an army of Mikes. His name was Mike. I want to create an army of Mikes who can go out and do what I do without having to pull me into all these conversations. So I said, okay, we can help you with that. So we basically took what Mike does. We did a great big mind meld, pulled out all the information that Mike had in his brain that he just intuitively knew how to do, like seasoned sales guy, 30 years of experience. And we codified it into a system that we then taught their salespeople. And we taught them, like, here's like nuts to bolts. Here's how you open a conversation. Here's how you design these agreements. Here's how you get approval internally and on the customer side for these agreements. Here's how you execute. Here's how you pull it all together. And even down to the nitty gritty of, like, here's how you run a really good meeting with a client to drive outcomes that you're trying to achieve. And so we built, it was basically, I think it was like an 8 or a 9 workshop program for the sales team. And we taught them how to basically become a mini version of Mike and become really expert negotiators of these agreements. Now, going back to something we talked about earlier is, okay, it's great to teach somebody how to do something new. How do you ensure the old habits don't creep back in?
Mhm.
So there's a second piece of our program where we were working directly with the management team on how do you coach and reinforce these skills. And so we introduced our coaching program where the managers, every time we taught a new skill to the account executives, we taught the same skill to the managers and how the managers could reinforce that skill. So over the course of a 2-year period, we basically ran our program, for about 2 years. It was like 18 months or so. And at the end of a 2-year period, they went from 19 of these agreements to 411.
Wow.
And they had secured over $100 million of additional revenue through these agreements.
Wow.
But I just want to reiterate that, the training
Mhm.
for the account executives by itself wasn't the secret sauce. The secret sauce was the combination of, yeah, we codified, we built the playbook, we taught the
Mhm.
playbook, but we got the leadership team's buy-in to actually reinforce and coach that playbook so it became their new normal.
And Paul, like and I don't know about you, but I hear this a lot from leaders, entrepreneurs, guys that are running, small businesses, but where they're having the same problem, like where everything is running through them. So they have maybe a sales team, but everything is running through them, and the number one answer you get is, well, nobody can do what I can do. Right, like that's what they always say. I have to handle it. Nobody can do this. Nobody. How do you overcome that with somebody, or with an entrepreneur? Let's just say, like, somebody who's at that level, who's on the precipice of growth, but they can't get. I know it's going to sound really bad when I say this, but they can't get over themselves. They can't just say it's not that they think that they're great, but they just believe that secret sauce that they have, that 30 years of sales experience, that dealing with the customers and building this on their own is just not transferable to this team. How do you overcome that?
That's a fabulous question.
Mhm.
And I think there's a couple of things. So if I was coaching somebody who had this, kind of tilt or propensity to think that everything has to run through them, there'd be a couple of things. So the first thing is, I think just the realization that a lot of that is just a self-fulfilling prophecy. The reason things have to run through this person is because they're not giving other people the opportunity to step up. And there's this idea that, like, I've been doing this for 10 years. I have the tribal knowledge, the carnal knowledge of, like, what's going on. I understand this business and our customers better than anybody else. While that may be true, you can't be the single point of failure. Like, if that person gets sick and they have to take 6 months off work, what's going to happen to the business? And one of two things will happen. People will rise up
Mhm.
and figure out how to plug the holes and carry on, or the business will just fall apart because nobody knows how to rise up. So I think one of the very simple things that I'm actually coaching somebody on right now is the idea of being the last person to speak. So when a problem comes up and you get a bunch of people in a room together and we're going to talk about this problem, one of the things senior leaders, the best senior leaders I find, do is they will speak last. Somebody will position the problem and they'll just wait
Hmm.
and they'll let other people talk. And oftentimes what happens is the people who are closest to the problem actually have a much clearer understanding of the problem. And lo and behold, they have solutions that are going to be way better than mine.
Mhm.
because I'm so far away from it. Have you seen that iceberg image where it talks about like executives see 4% of the iceberg,
Hmm.
VPs see 10%, like directors see 20%, but you get down to the frontline
Hmm.
employee. The frontline employee sees 100% of the issue,
Yeah.
right? Like that kind of goes back to my earlier point, like get those frontline people involved earlier. So I think that's the one thing is getting people, like just giving people the opportunity, the space to share their perspectives. And I think the other thing too that I would coach people on in this mindset is just delegate more. Like what can sure, everything can run through you,
Hmm.
but everything shouldn't.
Right.
Like the more senior you are, the more you need to delegate. And I had to learn this early on in my career, and I'm at a point now where I have people who I rely on, right? Who if I had to do everything to keep my business running, like it would fall apart in a matter of weeks. So I delegate. I take things that I know aren't my expertise and I give it to somebody else. So I think those are just two very simple examples of things that I would be encouraging someone who has that mindset.
Okay.
What about
Okay.
you? Like you see this, I'm sure. Like
Hmm.
what's been your experience with that?
Yeah. So my experience, and sometimes I've fallen into that trap, where I've been been that guy, and I know I've been that guy, and I've talked about, where I think, I'll just handle this myself. I'll close this deal myself. I'll get this going. But I think for me, the one thing is always to be that support system. Is it's like, and you've got kids, I've got kids, so it's like you're being a parent, and you have to tell that person, look, you've got to do this on your own. And sometimes you have to let go. You have to let the little bird out of the nest and let them fly. And also getting over the my way is the best way mentality, because what do they say, there's many ways to was it skin a cat, right? And there might be something that I've learned in my career. I've done sales before and marketing and that, and I've learned how to do things a certain way. But allowing somebody to learn and giving them the tools to learn and be able to have their own ideas and their own ways of closing, or their own ways of securing new business, or their own ways of marketing, or like for us, like doing social media ads, like, you allow them to test things. And now with technology, you have the ability to test so easily on the fly.
Yeah.
Like back when I was doing direct mail marketing, if you were testing something, you had to print. And that print was final, and then you had to put that out there, and then you were waiting to get the response back, and it would take 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, I guess, to get that. Now you can allow somebody to try something almost instantaneously and get the metrics right away from all points, whether it's from engagement and impressions to the actual drilling down to conversion. So for me, it's just allowing the new ideas to come through and say, okay, so what do you think you should try here? And then also asking people, like, where do you think you failed? Where do you think that maybe you missed the boat?
Yeah.
Let's go over this, because I could sit there and say, well, you did this wrong, but that might not have been it. It could have been something completely different. And obviously, I think you and I both agree, communication is key with everything.
Totally. Totally.
Hmm.
Well, and two comments on that. One is, especially with frontline sales and service teams, when you move into a management role, your skill set of your understanding of what the job was is out of date within about 6 months.
Hmm.
Sales and service is evolving so quickly that what worked 6 months ago isn't necessarily going to work today.
Yeah.
So you got these managers who've been in like a management position for 5 years. Think about how out of date their thinking is
Hmm.
in terms of the job and what it used to be versus what it is today. Like it's totally different. So that again, and the higher up in the organization you get, it just that time frame accelerates even
Right.
faster. And then the second thing is that I like that you said is there's never just one way to do something.
Hmm.
And so one of the things we really encourage inside of our coaching and just I described those Thursday tune-ups. If you're trying to figure out a way to solve a problem, doesn't matter what the problem is. One of the questions that I love asking is like, what are all the different ways we could tackle this? It's not what's the best way or what's the one
Hmm.
way or what's the one way that's going to guarantee success. It's like, what are
Hmm.
all the different ways we can tackle this?
Yeah.
And actually getting a list, and that just that simple phraseology actually encourages people to just throw out ideas. Versus if you say to somebody, like, what's the one way we would tackle this problem? Like immediately
Mhm.
people are thinking, okay, it's got to be the one thing, like it's got to be guaranteed to work. I don't know, like this might work, but I'm not going to say it because it's not guaranteed.
Yeah.
Just a simple shift in language to what are all the different things we could try?
Mhm. Yeah.
And what else? Great,
Yeah.
Adrian, love that idea. And what else? And getting
Hmm.
a list. And now we have something to pick from. And to your point, we can A/B test some of this stuff.
Yeah.
We can try different things.
Hmm. So because things are always changing, like what do you, and like, here we are, this is, early November 2024. What do you think the next 6 months is going to look like? Maybe the next year? Like, what do you think the future of business leadership is going to look like a year from now?
I think there's a couple of things. When we think about I think about leadership in a couple of different buckets. So there's the functional side of leadership and there's the emotional side of leadership.
Hmm.
And functionally, the what to do as a leader, I think that's becoming more automated. I think I think automation tools, CRM, especially from a sales perspective, I think it's really telling people what to do at a given point in time, whether it's with a customer or it's with an employee. Like, oh, you need to go have a conversation with so and so about something because the AI is telling you to do that.
Hmm.
The piece that's missing in all the automation, and I'm sure you're seeing this on the marketing side too, like you can automate all of these great digital ads, social media, you can have these automation flows in place. But if the message sucks, you're just amplifying crap.
Right.
And I
Yes.
think that's one of the biggest shifts that I'm finding is we need to help people on the emotional side and in terms of connecting with employees and with clients. And so I think that's number one. And I'm seeing it not just in terms of existing leaders that we have today, but the people who are coming into the workforce. I
Hmm.
think about like we got kids, like my eldest is 18. He's still in school. So, but he'll be entering the workforce in the next couple of years. I think about just the way that, technology and social media and how it's affecting the way that they communicate, right? Like they don't generally have these types of conversations face to face, over the phone, in person, with the frequency that like our generation would. And it isn't me badgering one generation over the next. It's just
Hmm.
it's a reality.
Yeah.
And so, especially in the contact center space that we do some work in, we're finding it's really hard for some of these big companies to hire customer service people who are like, you have to have conversations every day. And you
Hmm.
have to be able to emotionally connect with someone. You have to be able to demonstrate empathy. You have to be able to be a really great problem solver. But it's just that ability is number one. I think it's the emotional side of conversation that's just going to be evolving so rapidly,
Hmm.
especially with AI coming in. And then I think the second one is obviously the AI and automation. I think AI it's an amazing tool. There's tons of great applications for it, but it's going to very rapidly challenge what we perceive as real versus fake.
Okay.
And I can give you a very specific example
Hmm.
where this company that I'm working with, they have developed an AI platform, an AI SDR. It's not unique. Other companies have developed them. But this AI SDR is essentially able to have a 5 to 8 minute conversation with somebody like you and I are having right now. It
Hmm.
asks questions, it thinks about the response, and its whole goal is to book you into a demo, like book you
Okay.
into a conversation with an account executive. And I showed it to my parents who are in their late 70s.
Hmm.
And I let them kind of play around with it and have this conversation. My dad's like, so that's not a real person? I'm like, no, that's AI. It's like, wow, like that is scary how real it is.
Hmm.
It's like, yeah. But again, like we said earlier, all the automation, all the AI in the world, AI is awesome because it can scale.
Hmm.
But if you're scaling a crappy message, are you really scaling anything?
Right. Right.
So I,
Right.
I think that's what's going to happen. I think you're going to start to see
Hmm.
the AI become more
Hmm.
popular, but you're going to see people beginning to just. I think it's going to expose really bad messaging and content
Hmm.
faster than if it was just you and I doing this stuff.
Okay. So I'm going to throw you a little bit of a curveball. Okay. This
Okay.
is something that, I've been thinking about, and I wanted to pitch you on this and ask you this. So for an example, let's say I'm an entrepreneur. I've got a small to mid-sized business. I'm looking now to scale. I need to grow my business. I've got some marketing, doing a little bit of marketing. I've got a sales team. I've got my customer service slash operations team, we'll say, like just based on some of the customer profiles I work for. What would be like some key points of advice that you would give me to help me grow that and we, using your advice, using your expertise, how to grow that business based on what you know?
Okay. So are we talking about the outbound, like that company you were describing earlier? It's like an outbound sales team, and so
Yeah,
they're
let's just say I'm looking now. Okay, so I've got everything. I'm handling all the sales myself. Let's just say I'm doing all the cold calling, or I'm doing all the closing, and I want to scale this now. Okay, what would be like maybe just like 2 or 3 key points that you'd say to me to help me scale that business?
no problem. So I would do a couple of things. Number one is I would codify and document your existing process. You're really good at it, but I can almost guarantee you don't have it mapped out or documented. And it's difficult. Like people who are just naturally good at sales, they don't write down generally like, okay, so here when I asked this question, I got this response, and when I asked this question, that really blew up in my face. So I'm not going to ask
Mm,
that one again. Like so, just documenting the process from beginning to end,
mm,
that'd be the very first step. Once we documented, then we would look at, as great as Adrian is in this example, I would say, okay, so here are let's call it a 10-step process. 5 of these steps are incredible and best practices, and I wouldn't change anything about them. 7 of them are good, but with some minor tweaks, we can make them great. And 2 of them, you're actually hurting your results because they're not built on best practices. So we would take the 10 steps and we would move it from great to exceptional with some tweaking and editing based on the experience that we have in working with all of our different clients. And then the last thing is throughout the hiring, I won't get into too much on the hiring side and how do you hire great people, but after you hire a couple of people, it'd be what we did with that other organization. Train the sales reps, reinforce it with coaching, and get them to become a mini army of Adrians to be out there doing what you do so you can focus on higher value work.
okay.
That at a very kind of high level, that's essentially kind of what we do with all of our clients every day. We're documenting and mapping, we're scaling the awesome stuff, and we're tweaking the stuff that could be better, and then we're helping install it as new behaviors and habits.
Okay. Paul, this has all been great. And thank you very much for taking the time today. If somebody watching this video wants to reach out to you, how could they do that?
Yeah, so there's really 2 ways they can do it. They can go to our website, switchgear.ca, and check us out there, or they can hit me up on LinkedIn, Paul Hicks. You'll find me. I'm there, and that's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me. If someone wants to email me, reach out that way, paul@switchgear.ca. That'd be the third.
Okay. And you're an avid golfer. I know that.
I am.
Okay. So, quick question, okay? 480-yard par 5. You only get to use one club. What is it?
Oh man, I only get to use one club on a
The
480.
whole every
The
every
whole
shot
thing.
is the same club.
It's got to be a 7-iron. 7-iron. I won't get home into for sure,
Mm-hmm.
but I think 7-iron would leave me a pretty full shot for my third. And yeah, I could butter knife my way around a green with a 7-iron, I think.
I've seen you do some interesting things on the golf course, but taking that driver out of your hand, that's a definite
Oh, dude,
that's a definite handicap.
I have to get that sorted out. Well, listen, it's a good thing my son's doing golf management at Humber. I'm going to get him to give me some lessons. I should get some payoff for something there, right?
Yeah, at least you're getting something good from your Humber student. Mine is a pastry chef, so all I'm going to get is heavier. So anyway, Paul, thank you very much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. And if you want more information, visit switchgear.ca. Thanks a
Awesome.
lot, Paul.
Thanks, Adrian.
All
Thank
right.
you.
So I hope you liked that interview with Paul. He brought up a lot of great tips for anybody who wants to start a business who's having some challenges with growing their business, dealing with sales, dealing with marketing. Hope you got a lot of information about that. Don't forget to like this video, And of course, hit that subscribe button below. You don't want to miss any of the other videos that we have on small business advice, digital marketing, what have you. So hit that subscribe button below. Oh, and for some more great advice on growing your business online, check out this video that reveals a lot about that very subject.